Welcome everybody to this session on specific voices or something like that, right?
Yes.
What are we gonna? We decided we're going to change it up as we go. It's just going to be random voices. We're going to have a little conversation up here, but it's we have some a good panel here because we've got two people who have high profile work in the business. Not only that, it's ongoing. It's we have some recent news to break for some of them if you haven't seen it yet, but. Next to me we have Jack Amiel, and we have Chris Collins on the end, as you can see by the cards. And so Jack is currently the co-creator and writer of The Knick on Cinemax. And Chris, yay!
You are so right.
You are so right. And Chris Collins, as it said in he's got a pretty both of them have a very varied background, which we'll get into because I think it pertains to, particularly to Jack in that one instance. But Chris, I just want to go back. Chris was a production coordinator back on The Sopranos when you were like 8, right?
Yeah.
I was looking over. We talked the other day. We met and we talked, and I was just like looking at his stuff. I was like, how old was this guy when he started? And so he's also a staff writer on The Wire, the greatest television show ever made.
Yeah.
He was also a writer for Crash on Starz. This one we didn't talk about, which I'm ashamed that you didn't because I really loved it, Star Wars, The Clone Wars.
Yeah, I love it.
Good
One of my
work on
favorite shows to write for.
Yeah, right?
What's General Grievous really like?
He's not a very nice guy.
Good knowledge, Jack. Yeah.
Sith Lords. I have children. Not like, Okay, I'm a nerd.
And then you may know him as the executive producer and writer on Sons of Anarchy.
Thank you.
Right? Although it's important to note as we go forward that Chris did not work on this final season of Sons of Anarchy, but when we get to the audience portion of questions in like the last 20 minutes, he can certainly answer questions on Sons of Anarchy if you ask him. But Chris, if you didn't catch this recently, Chris was just announced that Chris is a writer and showrunner on a new series that's going to come out called Rain, fronted by Keanu Reeves, correct?
Yes.
Why don't we start? Let's start there, and,
Okay.
Because you've transitioned out of Sons of Anarchy, and now you're in kind of a high-profile series that has yet to hit the air. What's it like? Because we want to get into the working environment of what's it like to be in a writer's room. But starting from scratch, there you do have somebody you're working with. But how are you assembling things for Rain?
Well, it's a different environment out there right now. I have a partner on the show, Mark Abrams, is a very talented writer, but you need the right combination of things, I think, today to get a show, on the front page of the development report. It's not enough to just have a good idea and be able to sell it. You really have to have the elements attached. And in this case, this wasn't a situation where Mark and I were sitting around going, that's a great idea, and let's go out and try to package a thing. This was, Keanu working with a couple of stunt guys that he met on The Matrix, and they just happened to, over the course of the last 25 years, develop a really close relationship with Keanu, and so they just directed him in John Wick, that's coming out at the end of the month, and they brought him this series of books by Barry Eisler, and there's 8 of them. It's a massive property. It's got its own following, and so for us, it was like they came to us and said, what do you think about this idea? And then we were able to wrap our heads around that and kind of deliver our version of it, or put our vision behind it, and it's synced up with theirs. And it's one of these things now where we have a AAA actor who's got massive international value, and so from a business standpoint, it just really we're walking into a room with numbers that are proven, and now we're attached, and the next step will be finding a home for it, getting legs on it.
How do you approach that as somebody who's been in some of the top writing rooms on television, certainly going through some of the shows you've had? How do you approach that where you're in a situation where they had a property already developed? It wasn't like you said, it wasn't like you came up with it, which is in contrast to Jack, who created his show.
It's I'm gonna talk sort of a macro in terms of environment. I left Sons of Anarchy because I had some pieces of development that needed attention. I sold 4 pilots while I was on Sons of Anarchy, so I had to leave the show and kind of and develop and write those scripts. And what happened was I got in bed with what's happening in the industry right now is less films are getting made, and in TV we can do, at least on the dramatic side, a lot of the stuff they were doing in movies we can do in TV now. So there's a very interesting environment right now where a lot of feature guys and TV guys are getting together, and the feature guys they don't have experience in TV, so they're coming to us and kind of saying, kind of show us what to do and how to get the show made, and because they're used to telling these, hour and a half, 2 hour, 3 hour stories, and we're really telling, 10, 13, up to 24.
Yeah.
So
and then if it goes on, you're looking at a lot more.
Yeah, and you have this big Uber arc that could go, 5, 6, 7 seasons. So, that's been my experience since I left Sons of Anarchy. I have had some development with pretty much all feature people, and the tough thing about it is really. They want to get in the game, but their schedules, their feature schedules, or their development cycles are so much longer than TV. TV's generally very quick.
You didn't give them any secrets about how to get in the game, right?
Huh?
You didn't give them any secrets, right?
No, because eventually, once they learn it, they'll just toss me out of the boat. But it's,
Well, we're in that situation. This is an ongoing story, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. That tons of film people are coming to television to tell their stories. Famous directors, famous writers are all moving towards television to write and produce and just create content that they feel that they can't make. They can't tell that kind of story on the big screen because there's such a demand for instant box office, which means you just have to blow a bunch of shit up like on Friday, right? Otherwise, it gets pulled out of the theaters, going the other way. So everybody wants into TV. It's interesting with Jack. I wanted to so Jack, you're and I think we have a bigger issue to get into it because it's really interesting that you've co-created the Knick with your writing partner. It's a total critical acclaim. I'm sure you know that the New Yorker came out today and said, "Hey, we were wrong when we panned it."
Yeah.
It got like really great reviews. Mine was one of them, and then she didn't really like it, and then today would tell the story.
Well, okay, this is childish.
Oh no, it's not.
Okay, so I am an Upper West Side, Manhattan, New York liberal Jew. And our holy grail, oh, thank you. That's how many people like Jews, a smattering. Thank you. Can't wait for them to haul me away and for you to then forget to clap. So anyway, our holy grail is basically, the New Yorker. That's the tastemaker. That's what your parents' friends all read. And we got all these wonderful reviews, New York Times, LA Times, New York Magazine, all these other outlets. And so the only one that stood out as a negative review was the New Yorker. And this woman just really took a shit on us. And, and the thing was that for some reason, that's the one that seemed to stick for some people in my family. And and it was interesting because I even have friends who work at the New Yorker who've kind of gone up to this woman and said, I love the show. And yeah. So anyway, what's interesting though is that she wrote a retraction, and you never get that. Your mother's never going to apologize for how she raised you, and the critic is never going to say they were wrong. Well, it turns out this woman very bravely actually said, I now understand it. I didn't get it the first time, and I've now watched the whole thing in its entirety. I didn't understand how gritty it was, and so she basically said, I was wrong about the Knick. And, and I don't take any pleasure in it only because as Soderbergh always says, if you believe the good reviews, you have to believe the bad ones. Right. And so I don't believe any, I can't, because I have to look at it and go, okay, what do I think is an interesting story? What's happened is the internet has gotten so big and so crazy and fantastic. I mean, people want to share the experience after watching the show. And that's fantastic. But what happens is they start forecasting what they think is going to happen. And so what happens is when you disappoint them, because you've gone in a different direction, suddenly they're like, wait a second, I totally thought that was going to happen. I was like, well, that's why it didn't happen. Because you thought it was going to happen. That's not my job is not to give you the thing you want.
Right.
My job is to do something within the context of the story that might be possible, but also that you don't go, huh, saw that coming. So for us, it's been a very interesting experience to do television in this era, where honestly you have to live tweet your show, and there are actual online television shows where people sit around like this and just talk about the episode.
Right.
Like it's no longer about the premiere and okay, you got your reviews and that's it. Every episode is dissected, and you're sitting there going, "Oh my God!"
There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I wish I'd thought harder about the writing of it.
Well, speaking of the writing of it, it's interesting. I want to say that Jack, like everybody who has a television show, has to come in Los Angeles. There we meet with TV critics from all around our country, being the United States, and your country, being Canada. All the critics get together in Los Angeles, and everybody brings their shows in. It's the Television Critics Association press tour. And Jack was wonderful because when the Knick came, the very first question for him, and not in so many words, was, okay, so looking at your background here, this is literally what the question was, where did this come from? And I think it was a backhanded way of saying that you've done a lot of comedy, you've done a lot of rom-com stuff, and then all of a sudden, here comes this dark, bloody, amazing Knick. And you handled it supremely well by saying what?
Well, look, for those who didn't IMDb me, I started in sitcom. I was 24 years old, and it was the greatest thing I ever did. You learn to write unbelievably quickly. You learn to rewrite 50 pages in a night. You learn to figure it out on the fly. You learn to be funny on the fly. And you learn how to do 22, 24 episodes, usually an A story and a B story. So when you're really learning to write as a baby writer and then moving up, as a co-producer or whatever, you're getting endless experience. And you're getting to see how it plays in front of an audience. It was a 4-camera sitcom. It was the 90s, and that was fantastic. We went where the work was, and back then, not only was the work there, but that's where our talents really lay. And it was great. And then as sitcoms started to get saturated and die, we were very lucky because we had started doing film, and we were kind of like moonlighting in film. And before we knew it, we had 2 movies get made, but they were the kind of things that were an outgrowth of the TV shows we were doing. So we did a romantic comedy with Kate Hudson,
Yes.
Is there anything more sort of of the genre than a romantic comedy with Kate Hudson, and and a romantic comedy with Julia Stiles? So so for a while we just became the romantic comedy guys and the comedy guys, and then Disney said, "Oh, well, would you redo the Shaggy Dog?" And you go, "Well, I'm really not that kind." Well, yes, I am. I have a mortgage. So so these movies start getting made, and you go, "Well, good. This is my niche, and who am I to?" I'm not a snob. This is great.
Right.
And since our first episode of television, we've never been unemployed.
Right.
And that was 1993.
Yeah, so you said, we were in the cab last night. It's like, I've been working 22 years straight. That's
Yeah.
really amazing.
Yeah, I've saved not a penny, by the way. So that it was all an outgrowth of that. But every time my writing partner Michael Begler and I had said, let's write something that no one's going to make. Let's write something just for us, because we're very good at hitting a demographic. Studios liked us because they knew how to market to a certain demographic of moviegoer that would then go see our movie and they go, oh, it made money, and then we'll make a sequel of your movie. And so we're like, okay. But what happened for us was we said, let's write something that no one's gonna. We just got sick of it. They are making fewer and fewer movies, and they're making a lot more, Batmans and Hunger Games, and they're making a lot less of everything else. And what was it? Sony used to make 16 movies. Now they make 8. They're not developing as much as they used to. And so we just looked at each other and said, this is kind of a dying business, and we don't want to be the last buggy whip manufacturer. So ironically, we did a show where our prop guys have to actually buy buggy whips. But so we just started talking about ideas that have always fascinated us, and that's where the Knick came from. And you have to show proof of concept. I mean, I am still astonished that Cinemax, basically, HBO really, said, okay, guys, go write 10. You're the guys who wrote The Shaggy Dog. Sure, why not? We totally believe you can write Soderbergh 10 episodes of this. But you write the pilot as proof of concept, and you write a document basically saying where you want the show to go. And and specific voices or whatever this is called, you have to show your point of view. Show that you're the person with the voice, the man or the woman with the voice that is the show. I don't have a writing staff. I have one guy who does 2 episodes with us, and we work, comes off of our outline. But my writing partner and I are the complete and total voice of the show. And it's not because we want to be indispensable, because Hollywood just will keep you around as long as you want. But the reason we did it was because it's our voice, and we just didn't have time, because we were working on a very tight schedule, to bring in other people to write episodes. And so, the Knick really just came out of the fact that we said, let's do something crazy. And we just happen to live in a world where HBO and Cinemax and a lot of other places are saying, yeah, that's crazy, let's do it.
Yeah, and I think that was, we've talked about this a little bit, I think this was a really good example, something I learned when I started doing criticism, is that you really can't judge somebody by their past credits. It's what people want to do online. They'll say, oh, I don't want to watch that, this person did XXX. You can't do that. If you go back to some of the greatest writers, and David Chase in The Sopranos did a lot of work on stuff that he...
Matthew Weiner wrote sitcom for Becker.
Right.
Charlie Kaufman wrote on sitcoms. Boy Meets World. You can't do it. The guy who runs Scandal, one of my close friends, we started a sitcom together.
Right.
The guy who created Desperate Housewives was a sitcom. You can't look and go, well, he worked on this, so he must have been that. It's because, the stuff that gets made is what gets made. And you really have very little power over the fact that, look, studios are chasing audiences. And, the 5 great spec scripts you did that got you that job to sell out,
Right.
Those are never going to get made because, let's face it, you don't have the money to make them, or the, indies are dead or whatever, in that genre. So, yeah.
Well, Chris, I want to talk to you about getting into the writer's room, because you've gone through, here you were on The Sopranos, on The Wire, and Sons of Anarchy, and I know you started out where you were getting advice at the beginning from writers, and then you started to do your own writing, and then you moved all the way up to where you wrote a ton of episodes for, maybe what we think we talked about, maybe 2 full seasons worth total of stuff that you wrote on your own for Sons of Anarchy, and you were executive producer there. Take us through that experience of going through so many different writers' rooms and what you learned when you were in them.
It's tough to break into a room. There's a couple of routes that people that usually end up well. You can be a writer's assistant in the room and kind of work with the room, and because being in a room, one is you're spending a lot of time around a table with the same people every day. So that can be, personalities really have to match up, and it needs to remain respectful. It can't get personal and stuff like that. So, being a writer's assistant, you're in the room, you're not talking, you're taking notes, and you're being asked questions and stuff like that. But it's really a good opportunity for people to really assess you as a personality and as a potential talent. Another way, the way I went into it was, when I finally discovered, I wasn't one of these guys that kind of, I was an archaeologist at one point. I played in a punk rock band, worked as a music promoter. So I met, I just happened to get an assistant job in LA, and ultimately wanted to produce, and HBO put me through this producing program, and then I pitched a movie idea I had to a novelist I knew, and he turned in a first draft, and I rewrote him and sent it back to him. He rewrote it. So 5 drafts later, there was an opportunity that opened up on The Wire, and for a script coordinator for David Simon, the first the first sentence he said to me was 4 interviews before I got to him was, if you want to be a writer, you're in the wrong place. You're never going to write for this show. So in my mind, I said, at least I'll learn how to write. And so I signed up as the script coordinator, and that position really is preparing the scripts for production, and you get an opportunity to work with the showrunner creator on a very intimate level. So I spent hours publishing scripts for him, giving them notes when I saw something. And you have to, it's, the door is open, and it's really up to you to kind of walk through it and navigate it, And so some other producers on the show, George Pelicano, Ed Burns, who co-created the thing, came up to me midway through the season and said, are you ready to write? And I said, David said I would never write for the show. And they said, why don't you write voices for the show, write the scenes, and turn them into him. And so I did. And I work with this guy every day. And there's like 2 months left of the season, and he didn't acknowledge those scenes. So, and I didn't bring it up ever again. And so the last day of work, season 3, he called me into his office, and he had all my scenes laid out, and he picked one up, and he said I would have flown this as is, and invited me back season 4 as a staff writer. And that's how it broke in. So, it's, thanks. It's, you gotta,
Don't clap, I was up for that job.
Yeah. So it's, there's ways in, relationships are big, luck is big. And then ultimately, I wouldn't have got that job if I couldn't write the show. There was nobody on The Wire that wrote, that was a writer on there that couldn't write those voices. So, and that turned into, end of season 4, he invited me back. He cut the staff in half and invited me back as a story editor. And so that's, I got 2
For
seasons.
season 5.
Season
The final
5,
season.
yeah, and gave me an episode that season. Season 4, I was responsible for a storyline, this character Bubbles. So I had to write his entire storyline for the season. And that was my tryout, and then after I did that, he invited me back. But, from there, I've done every position from there. It's like staff writer, story editor, executive story editor, co-producer, producer, supervising producer, co-EP to EP. So, I think it's an important process in terms of, because writing is a craft, It's one thing to have a voice and really have a point of view, but, you really have to know how to craft television. And working in a room, you learn that. You learn where to begin at the beginning of the season. What do you talk about when you start a season? You talk about characters. If it's the first season, where are you beginning? If it's the second, third, fourth, fifth, what have they done and where are they now emotionally in the story? And then beyond that, you go into themes. What are we talking about this season? Where are we going? And then ultimately, you talk about these bigger arcs, and then you narrow it down to the episodes, and that's when it gets really fun in terms of if it's a show like Sons of Anarchy, for instance, you have a big ensemble cast, you have a lot of territory and a lot of history to cover with these characters, and then then you need this action element, like the action engine. What's going to happen this episode that really, in addition to all this emotional and history and character stuff, what's going to drive it, what's going to add that little punch to it. So, and you do that over, different stories, A, B, C, D, whatever you need to construct that episode.
And Jack, when you go into the Knick and you're talking about being in the writer's room, you have this, you talked about writing essentially a Bible for what the show's about and where it's going at the beginning. Proof of an idea is what you said.
Proof of concept.
Proof of concept.
It's one thing to say, I have this great idea. It's another thing to say, yeah, but it's all about the execution. I mean, that's the thing. It's all about, you make a billion little decisions that add up to what you're doing. And I mean, look, I could have said, hey, there's a movie about a guy who wants to who founds Facebook. And you go, who cares? But if it's put in the right hands, David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin's hands, you go, oh wow, that's really interesting. I mean, because how many times have we been surprised that something that seems weird or crazy or nuts, and you go, oh, wait a second. I mean, it's a show about a biker gang. Really? I think I saw Every Which Way But Loose. I think there was a biker gang in that. No. When you watch Sons of Anarchy, you go, okay, there's deep plots, there's interesting stuff. And that's the thing is that you have to prove what you're going to do. What's the tone? Who are the voices? Who are these people? Where are they going? And why am I interested? Why am I rooting? Am I not rooting? And the thing is, you end up, I took the same route. I started as a staff writer, story editor, executive story editor, co-producer, producer, supervising producer, exec, co-exec, exec producer, and you learn your craft. You learn your craft in a system where you learn to ask the most basic questions in the world. But the problem is when you can't answer them, you know you've made a mistake. So it's what's driving this scene. I've asked that question a million times. What's the spine of this episode? What's this based around? Where am I going with this? Sometimes, you'll see someone write a really fantastic scene and you go, wow, what a great scene that has absolutely no purpose. And you just know that if you're cutting for time, that sucker's going.
Yeah.
And you go, that's a fantastic scene. By the way, we spent an enormous amount of money to shoot that outside. But you have to make those decisions early, and you have to go, is this driving our story? The one thing about our show, Soderbergh does an extraordinarily good job of trying to see how little story he can get away with. Mm-hmm. How little he can give you because he really trusts that the audience is smart. Mm-hmm. And so you find you're combing stuff away, and you're asking the most basic question, whose scene is it?
Right.
And sometimes I haven't asked, I will answer it differently than Soderbergh will, because what happens is we'll do a scene and I'll have crafted the dialogue and had movements and, oh, he's going here and she's going there. And then we'll be sitting on set and he'll go, whose scene is it? And you sit and you go, fuck. He's asking me a question I really should know the answer to. Well, I think it's Lucy's scene. He goes, yeah, I think it's Lucy's scene too. So suddenly you've got this scene and Clive Owen's running around being a movie star and being brilliant, and the other actors are doing this, and the prosthetics guy have this incredible thing in the face, and this is going on, and there's blood dripping, and all you're seeing is one character sort of framed between all the others doing their thing. And the scene is so much more interesting because it's that character's scene, and really it's how that character is processing all the other stuff. I always think of it as Dr. Zhivago. If you watch Dr. Zhivago, they almost never show you violence. But they always show you Dr. Zhivago's face looking at the violence, and his horror is what then gets your mind going, oh my God, what could that be? What could that be? What could that be? And sometimes it's better to not, it's the shark in Jaws. And so for us, you're always asking a million tiny questions that add up to something. Where do I want them to go? Why would they do this? I don't believe she'd do that. I can't justify that. Well, how could you? No, I'm trying too hard to justify it. We have to go in another direction because it would have been a great scene, but it's just not real. It's not true. And you have to write the truth. You have to write the truth of that character. Now, some characters are really over the top, and you can take them places, and you can anchor it. But for us, it has to be plausible. And the good news is we did so much research at the beginning, and 1900 is such a fucked up time that you really do get the ability to say, no, they did this. Yeah. Oh no, they hung you upside down by your feet for 4 weeks. Really? Yeah, and then you got an aneurysm. You can go to this incredibly odd places because, people are always commenting how racist our main character is. And the thing is, he's absolutely a product of 1900 in America. Right. You're 35 years away from emancipation, right, and 50 years away from Jackie Robinson getting to throw a ball with white people. Right. So where do you think people are on the spectrum of acceptance of African Americans? Right. They're much closer to, their property than they are to, hey, I really wish you could play baseball with me. Right. That informs your world.
It had to be real for that part, yeah.
And it had to be, and that's exactly what it was. And if you look at the media of the time, and you look at everything as so offensively racist, and you're going, no one blinked an eye. No one said, that's wrong. Right. No, most people said, what the hell? Yeah. Maybe I will go to that minstrel show. Right.
Yeah. So one of the things that's interesting about VIFF, if we can say that, is that we're combining film and television voices. And last night there was a dinner, and there's directors and there's movie people around with TV people.
You weren't invited. I'm so sorry. Thanks for talking about the dinner. Real nice of you, Tim. Can I just say the appetizers were fantastic. Choice of 2 desserts. And then there was a party after.
There was.
Hope you enjoyed not being there.
But the point, Jack, of that was that
and the canapes.
But the film people, the directors and the people who had been writing films, they were looking at you guys, thinking like, wow, here I got this movie and I was given this job task of writing this movie and I got 2 hours. And then they look at you guys and they're like, okay, well, they've got 13 hours in just this one season, and the show is going to come back, which means they're going to get a total of 26 hours. And they were just, their minds were blown about what they could do with character depth and where they could go. So when you guys are mapping out various shows and characters, how do you, in your mind, how are you thinking about like time? Like, I can really go deep with this guy, I can really drill down into this person's character, or what? How are you thinking? Go ahead, Chris.
Well, you know, I guess it depends on, you know, I sold a show with, to HBO at one point with Martin Scorsese and Leo DiCaprio about Butch Cassidy. And so, you know, I guess it really boils down to the story that you're trying to tell. How big is it? Is it epic? You know, is it, you know, and in this particular case, we were talking about, you know, a very iconic, legendary figure of the American Old West, and plugging into that character at a time when the Old West was, you know, dying, and this guy, you know, in legend, or part legend, part fact, was able to, you know, be the head of one of the biggest confederacies of the American Old West. You know, the Wild Bunch, that at one point had over 200, you know, gangsters in it. And so for me, like when I, you know, just taking that example, for instance, here's a guy, you know, to me that felt like an origin story. Like, you know, and then there are layers to that. You know, Butch Cassidy was documented as never killing somebody, yet he was the head of one of the most dangerous gangs of the American Old West, some of the fastest guns ever. You know, Kid Curry, Sundance was, you know, everyone thinks, you know, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, but there are these other very serious, dangerous characters, you know, real life characters in that story. So, like, how did this guy wind up being the head of this gang, right? And ultimately, where I landed was he was a very smart, intelligent guy. He was sort of like a planner. He did the bank robberies, all that stuff. So, you know, so taking that guy in an origin situation, and then and in the backdrop of this this landscape, which was basically going away, and how would this character adapt to that, and ultimately starting it out as a small journey, right? Putting together the Wild Bunch and seeing, you know, the small gang grow into this massive thing, and then ultimately ending back where he started. And that felt like a good story.
Do you ever get to the point where you're at the end of this? I mean, you're now at the end of season 1 of the Knick.
Yeah.
Was there has ever been a moment where you like, or even at the end of one of the seasons of SOA, where you're just like, okay, now what? Now what do we do? I mean, everybody's all excited, and they're like, okay, now do it again.
For us, no, because remember, we're in our first season. We only do 10 episodes.
Right.
So we've, you know, most of the time during season 1 and even planning season 1, we're like, okay, we got to save that. We'll save that for next year. We'll save that. We'll save that. And the more we dug and the more we did, the more we were like, okay, we'll save that. And I mean, not to be crass, because I'm so classy, but you know, you don't want to blow your load. Like, there are certain things, and the one thing that I'm so grateful to HBO and Cinemax for is you get this note that you don't get at like traditional networks sometimes. We started packing everything into the first 2-3 episodes. We're like, we're gonna literally throw in the kitchen sink everything.
Right.
And they were like, hey man, just chill.
Yeah.
You know,
Spread
literally,
out.
like Michael Lombardo and Karen Tholis just said, hey, just take your time, spread it out, tease them a little. I'm like, no, because we've been trained, like, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know, just to throw everything in, because what if they don't watch the
Right.
third episode because the second episode didn't have 15 murders in it, and
Right.
you know, and so we took that to heart, and we've really teased it out, and so that the episodes now are really ramping up for the end of the season. In a way that we really did construct it that way once we took that note to heart. And by the way, network notes sometimes can actually be good, but for the most part, you just want to kill yourself. But the premium cable channels have really made a point of being hands-off and really smart and only stepping in when they need to. But we don't run out, because there's always so much to do, and we're having to pull stuff that we loved. and go, well, okay, we'll do it some other time.
Right.
But when we're looking at our characters, the one thing that's nice is because we're a very small brain trust, you know, we write all of our episodes before the season. We have the benefit of that simply because we only do 10, and the way our schedule works, and my writing partner and I are very fast. So we know we know where we're going, and so we can really arc things the way we want to, and not be, you know, and not sit there and paint ourselves into a corner and go,
Right.
uh-oh, you know, episode 17, what are we going to do?
Right.
And I feel for people who do, you know, The Good Wife has made a very big push to say, look, we do 22. It's a lot harder.
Right.
And I absolutely agree with them. That said, you know, when you're looking at character, I always feel that with Thackeray, our main character, you know, as long as we're true to him, we're fine. I mean, we started with this premise of a guy who's experimenting medically, and he's leaving this massive body count of people behind him because it's trial and error in 1900. There's no penicillin. There's no MRIs. There's no anything. They're just figuring it out as they go along. All the things that we think we're so smart and we only know because a bunch of mostly men screwed up about 1 billion times on an appendectomy or on a gallbladder removal to finally figure out how to do it. And so we said, well, what's that guy like? I mean, how do you, knowing that you've gone into a surgery 10 times and it's failed, 10 different times, and you've killed 10 people, how do you go into the 11th surgery?
Right.
And so that we started to say, well, that's got to be someone who's always perpetually moving forward. That's somebody who's, you know, and how do they do that? And in this era, a lot of the doctors, some were very religious and they used their religion. Some were, ours just, you know, is very common of the era, became a cocaine addict because it gave him courage and it gave him speed and endurance, and he could keep pushing forward. And I
it
knew
blocked out some of the darkness.
Exactly. And I knew Clive got the character perfectly when we were doing maybe the 5th scene of the episode, and it's a big eulogy, and he crushes the eulogy. He was fantastic. And then after the eulogy, there was a scene where he stops and he talks to 2 characters, Cornelia and Sister Harriet. And he just said, I don't want to talk to them. And I said, okay, that's fine. The dialogue isn't that important. We can throw it somewhere else. And I said, why? And he said, because he's always moving. He's not going to sit and stand and talk to these people. I want people to know this guy's on the move. He's going to the next thing. He's not going to dwell on the death. He's not going to dwell on anything. He's going to fly. And I said, he gets it. From that moment on, I was like, wow, okay. And that actually came back and informed us. So a lot of our scenes, we started putting on the move, and we started saying, okay, you know what? Let's leave our conversations 3/4 done, and then he walks out at the end, you know.
Right.
So that you know, in a lot of scenes, he never finishes the conversation.
Right.
He's off to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's how you start to say, oh, okay, who is this guy? What is he doing? How selfish is he? You know, is he doing this because he wants to save people, or is he doing it because it's about his ego, or it's, you know, he's playing God, or he's got a war against God and saying, you're not going to take another one, I'm going to beat you on this one.
Right.
So you keep asking yourself basic questions about that, and then that keeps informing your character.
I think that's interesting what you said, and I would like to see if both of you have instances where, because it's being in a writer's room is it's collaborative, and but you just had a situation where it's your show, you created a character, and then later Clive Owen comes back to tell you, I don't want to do it this way because, you know, essentially you have created Clive Owen's character, but he's telling you now he wouldn't do it this way. So how does that do it? And then Chris, you can tell him, I'm sure there must have been a story where an actor is now taking stuff that you've written and saying, I look at it this way. So you went with it, and I wonder if there's any times where you shut it down and say, no, we're not going with that.
Well, sure. I mean, no, but look, the thing is, actors prepare in a very specific way. Each one does their own thing, but they're all asking what the truth of the character is. You know, they have to play it, and if it doesn't work, look, I worked on a sitcom 18 years ago called Empty Nest. I don't think people even remember it. It was a spinoff of Golden Girls with, right? Seriously?
It's Canada. They're really nice.
Okay, so, and what happens is, you know, and you think, okay, what are you going to learn on this show? And what happened was, we had a guy named Richard Mulligan who'd been in Soap, and he'd been in a lot of other things, and Richard would give it his level best with every scene, and even in rehearsals. You have to see in sitcom, a lot of people save their performances, and they half-ass it until show night, or you know, and a lot, you know, it was 7 seasons, so a lot of people were a little petulant to begin with, and I'm not going to work that hard. Okay, well, enjoy your $250,000 a week. Anyway, and Richard would break his back to make your stuff work. And you'd go, and I remember the showrunner turning to me and saying, the best thing about Richard is if it doesn't work, you know it's your fault, not his. And you realize that you have to then go back and go, yeah, okay, that didn't, it didn't work. And he was the ultimate professional. And I've worked with people who over the years, Julie Stiles was someone who came to me one night in Prague and said, these two scenes, I can't work them, I'm not, and she was lost a little bit. And she said, if you could only maybe sit down and talk with me for 20 minutes about this, I think, and I said, you're right. And it turned into this really lovely scene, and she was able to get into the character. She was 22 at the time, and I was a whopping 33 or something. But, you know, she was a little nervous about approaching it. Clive and all of our actors prepare. They've got a lot of stage experience. And if it's not real, they're not going to play it. Or they're not going to be able to play it. They'll fake it. But, so when they come to you, you have to honor that.
Right.
But there are times, you know, there's times, I think I told you, like Clive has a scene in the basement where he tells Algernon he doesn't want him to be in his hospital. He's an African-American guy. And Clive, being British, kept throwing in a couple words. You know, instead of saying, I don't want you, you know, you can't run away and join the circus if the circus doesn't want you, and I don't want you in my circus, is the line. And he says, and Clive kept saying, you can't run away and join the circus if the circus doesn't want you, because quite frankly, to be honest, I don't want you in my circus. And I said, Clive, that's British. In England, you say the mean thing with lots of equivocations, but you're still being mean. In America, we just say, fuck you to your face. I said, so basically, I don't want you in my circus. And he looked at me, and I said, yeah, we're terrible. And that's how we talk. And he said, you're an American. And he said, oh, okay. And so the next time he did it, and it's funny because I see it in all the promos. And I'm like, yeah, that scene would not have worked if he'd been equivocating. This guy's basically saying, I'm an unapologetic racist. And this is how it is. And so you take your cues from them, and they take your cues from you. I don't care where a good idea comes from. I mean, we're on a set with the most incredible craftspeople, artisans, actors, costume designers, and you just want to be the lucky beneficiary of their work. I mean, when Steven Soderbergh says, I want to make the music really funky and weird, you don't go, I really want period score. You go, I am willing to jump off any cliff with you because you are smarter than I am by 100 miles. So I'm sorry. Go.
Well, you know, I have a lot of experiences and points of view on this. It really depends on what kind of show you're on or what kind of show you want to run, right? So in Jack's situation, he's straight out of the gate, he's working with Clive Owen, right? And it's not like you're basically hiring an actor that that hasn't really hit his stride yet, you know. And so typically in TV, what happens is season one as a showrunner, you sort of have the power, over the actor, and everyone's saying yeah, and so there aren't going to be too many situations where the actor's saying, you know what, fuck this. Season two, you start to share that power, and season three, they start to look at you like, who are you? And then season 4 and 5, they take over the show, and you're fired, and
every actor I hire, I say, they're like, oh my God, we're so glad we got the job. And I just look at them and I go, you know you're going to fire me in season 3, right? I say to every actor I hire.
Yeah. So, I once had an actor come up to me and say, this is the worst scene I've ever read. And then I changed like 3 words in that line. I took out like the and then he was like, perfect. And we shot, and he said the line.
So you were humoring him.
Yeah. Well, that's all it needed. I guess it was more like
it was a really shitty and. I
remember that. And it was more the actor saying, "Fuck you." So it's a murky territory. It's on one hand you're a writer and ultimately, but you're also depending on what you're doing on the show, if you're upper level producer, you're really responsible for running a business and the tone of the show and resolving problems and really not letting those get out of hand, because ultimately you're, if a situation gets out of hand, it just costs everybody money. You're behind and everyone's pissed off And it's really hard to catch up in TV because ultimately you have a gun to your head anyway, trying to make your days and all that stuff. So, you know, from a strategy standpoint, you know, it is in your best interest to be as collaborative as possible, in my opinion. Because that way, you know, I think the last thing an actor wants is, or most actors is you know, you saying, no, it's got to be said this way, you know, because at that point it's not really collaborative. You're kind of tying them up, you know, and TV and this business, I believe, is a really starting from the writers' room where you know, you're sitting around a table with 5, 6 other writers and arguing story back and forth. You know, that's what makes it better, in my experience. It's never been better with just one guy saying, no, it's got to be this way when 5 other people are giving you the same note. So with, you know, and you know, if I was in Jack's shoes and Clive Owen had a point of view on the character and you know, and it's his character that he's going to grow with, and he's obviously a very experienced and successful actor, I would listen to that, you know, because ultimately, you know, that's probably what's going to make it better.
Well, you've also worked with a lot of creators who kind of are known for. I mean, there is give and take, but they're known for, like, this is how it's going to go. I mean, David Simon was one of them. So how did he give and take?
Well, David, all right, season 5 of The Wire, he had me basically, I was an on-set writer, producer. That wasn't my title, producer. I didn't have that in my title, but that's effectively what I was for half the season. And he kept me and this guy, Bill Zorzi, and we flip-flopped episodes, right? So the way I came up and learned this was, you know, a good rule for lines is because ultimately, if you because I've been in situations where actors misinterpreted a line or decided not to say it or said something else, totally made something up that ultimately did not connect with the story or what we were trying to do as writers down the line. It's all, you know, it's sort of all connected. So David's rule to us was as long as it doesn't change meaning, I'm okay with that, you know? Unless it's a joke or something like that, or if it doesn't fit the tone of the show, or, you know, I think that's a good rule. And I always went by that rule. You know, Kurt Sutter was saying, you know, when I started working for Kurt, you know, we went over, you know, it's a good idea to really lay out the ground rules. Like, you know, what are you willing to let the actors get away with, you know, or how far do you want to take this? And I just, you know, I always say up front, you know, I say the rule. I say as long as it doesn't change meaning, you know, I let it go. And that's the rule I've lived by in this for, you know, almost 10 years I've been doing this.
I think the other thing you have to remember is I have never given an acting note to an actor unless a few conditions were met. I always go to the director, and not just on my show now because he happens to be smarter than I am by a lot, but you don't give acting notes to actors outside of the director. At least I don't. I even starting in sitcom, and when in the sitcom the writer has all the power, and it's a great situation to be in. And they used to say to us, "Don't talk to the actors." If you were a low-level writer, they always say, "Don't talk to the actors," like they were, you know, literally like their eyeballs were bleeding and they were the Ebola patient 0. Like, you just stay away. And what you ended up realizing was that they often came to you to go, "Hey, young writer who's scared of me, would you change this? Can I change this line?" And you go, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, that would work, but maybe you should talk to the people who have longer, better titles than me. And they go, "Oh, yeah, sure, sure." And then they'd be like, "Hey, Jack said I could change this line." And I'm like, "Oh, fuck bags." So, you know, you have to be very careful, and you don't want to undermine the director. Certainly on a movie set, the director their brain will explode. I mean, a lot of them don't want writers on set. So you have to be really collaborative because that's not where you don't have much of a power base on a movie set if you're a writer. It really is a director's medium, the studio, you know. And so you literally serve at the pleasure of the director. If they don't want you on set anymore, they just say, yeah, don't come. And so I've been very lucky that the directors I've worked with have always said, yeah, sure, whatever, or I need you on set, or would you stay with us, or, would you rewrite on set? But you don't, I also know that on my show, I'll say something like, look, that you actually have to say that word because, so I'll write herd on content-y things, but I will never give an acting note. And they'll even say, well, what's the line readings? And sometimes it's a British actress playing American going, what's the line reading? And I'll say, you know what? Let's go talk to Stephen because I'm not comfortable giving you anything. And they're like, well, no, just why can't you do it? It's like, you're frightened of him, aren't you? But I would never do it, and I wouldn't do it on a sitcom set because you don't want to undermine the director, because once the director loses the crew, you are fucked. And that's completely true no matter what. If the crew doesn't respect the director and doesn't believe the director has some authority creatively, you're screwed. And I've seen it way too much.
But you're both in this kind of interesting situation now that I think is when you're getting into the sort of the inside baseball of it. Television is a writer's medium, and as you noted, film is a director's medium. But both of you are in unique situations in that you've got Chris has stuff out that will eventually be Chris completely running the show. It'll be all your vision. Yeah. You've worked with people who have created shows who have a standard and a vision you can't really tinker with too much, and now you're going to be on a thing where Keanu Reeves has hired you to do this, and it's and you're going to work it to your vision, but it's not something that you penned on your own at home. I mean, that's clearly you have projects out at HBO and other places that will pop, and you'll get that chance. And here you are, Jack, where you created a series, so you're in a different position. So it's your voice, and yet every time anybody talks about the Knick or it's one of the rare instances where it's reversed, and it'll say the Knick, Steven Soderbergh, and
yeah.
And it's your
I know
show.
They didn't say the Knick from the writer of the Shaggy Dog.
Well, we understand that, but it is kind of weird. I mean, if you guys don't know that, it is odd to not have Jack be like, this is Jack's show. People will say, well, it's Steven Soderbergh
here's the thing.
and Clive Owen.
There's a few pieces of that. Now, the one piece of it is that I have no problem deferring to anybody on a set when they have a good idea.
Right.
I'll take a good idea from the voices inside the schizophrenic in the corner's head. I don't care.
Right.
If it's an interesting idea, and by the way, the costume designer can come to you and say, we found this thing, and that would be interesting if we did. I'm like, that's kind of cool. Right. Because our show is about research, and they'll come to me with some piece of research, and you go, I never knew. So I'm okay with that. I'm also okay because obviously Soderbergh is such a brilliant, and you want that singular voice. I mean, it's not that he did our pilot. He's doing 10 episodes this season, 10 episodes next season.
It's unheard
so
of.
I am over the moon of that. But also there's a production side of it, which is he has his production team that came in. Mm-hmm. So instead of me sitting around going, well, how are we going to schedule this? Well, you know what? Scheduling is not my long suit. Right. And yet he has a guy named Greg Jacobs, who is absolutely the best production mind I've ever seen. He's got a line producer who can turn a nickel into a quarter on screen, and you've got all these department heads who are absolutely the best there is. So what am I going to do? Am I going to run in and go, you know what? I don't think we should schedule that day that way. They have considered everything, and there are pieces of this that I get in and I go, you know what, guys, the marketing thing, I don't like that, but I will always go to the side and say to Stephen, I'm curious if we should do that, because it's a collaboration, and I am so much happier to let everyone. The thing that our set runs on is trust. The writers trust the words. I mean, that they're right, and we give them to the actors, and they trust us. They trust Stephen to guide them where they want to go. Stephen doesn't micromanage. He does 4 jobs on set. He holds the camera. I mean, what's very unique, he holds the camera, so he's our A cameraman. He's our director of photography. He's our director. He's an exec producer. And then he goes home that night and he edits what he shot into rough cut scenes with score.
Okay.
It's very hard to step into that process and go, well, let me tell you how I know better. Because it's you're watching. Look, I'll never see Michelangelo paint, but I've gotten to see Steven Soderbergh direct 10 hours.
Right.
And your mouth hangs agape.
Right.
So I don't mind not being the my ego, the showrunner. I don't need to be Matthew Weiner running in and going, "That's not how you do it." Because Steven has a very different way of working, and he's very low key.
Right.
He keeps a very low key set, and one of the things he does is he trusts. So I've never seen him go up to a costume designer and go, "I don't like that shirt," because our costume designer is extraordinary, and so he trusts her to do her job. He trusts the set decorators to do their job, and so if you're doing your job, he doesn't have to say anything. And so if I'm doing my job, he doesn't have to. And we all run on this trust that everyone's going to bring their A game, and that nobody's ever going to half-ass it.
Right.
And so, showrunner, I don't need to be. I don't need that. That's a nice idea, but I've written 10 solid hours that have not changed a whit without my pen.
Right.
And it's on television, and I am being protected by Steven. It is only to my benefit to have him and Greg Jacobs and all of our people there. And if I don't get to egotistically run around and go, "Hey, everybody, I'm the boss," I can live with that, because we don't need me to be the vision from episode to episode. If Steven's the vision with us from episode, we're all the vision.
Right.
And it's collaborative, and that's great.
Chris.
Well, I'm still developing my ego. So, I just want to add, Jack said some interesting things, and you're in a very unique situation where, you have a director that's cross-boarding 10 episodes and shooting it all, and it's like, okay. I would be just sitting at home watching TV and calling it in, saying, is it done? But, Jack was right in a sense that, TV is a writer's medium. So the joke in the business is, or it used to be the joke anyway, was, in film, you hand in a script and you're dead to them. And in TV, it's a director hands in a cut and he's dead to you. So, but, I think it's just to offer a different, scenario. I always, when I get on set with a new director, because episodic TV, you have a lot of directors. It depends on what it is, and ultimately, you need that director to not come in and say, "Okay, this is how I'm going to do it." You need that director to come in and say, "Okay, I'm going to make this feel like the show," and really follow that pattern, the tone. So, we have these things called tone meetings where, we sit down with the script and the director one-on-one, and with the whole, the department heads sit around and we go over every single page of the script, right? To make sure that the director understands the meaning, the tone, where it's all going. And it's also an opportunity for the director to ask a lot of questions, right?
Tone meetings. Okay.
Yeah, and really to say, and also give ideas. That's the collaborative, because that's the pre-production moment where, if you have a question or you want to change something, and that goes to all the actors and everybody else, because if you show up on the day and want to change a line in rehearsal, or all of a sudden you want a red shirt on that guy and we only have, blue shirts, that's a problem. You're behind. It costs money. Every minute you're behind translates into dollars. So, and as a manager of the show, you're responsible for that. The studios and the networks are going to come to you and say, what the fuck happened?
Right.
Why are you $100,000 over? So with the directors, I sit same way I do with, I sit down at the beginning of the episode and I say to the director, how do you want to run this? Do you want, if I have a note, do you want me to give it to you, or do you want me to give it to the actor? The actors on episodic are, they know that you're the writer and they understand the dynamic, right? So sometimes, and most directors, TV directors understand that too. So they'll just say, just give it to the actor, right? So, but I always will show respect, and I'll say to the director, hey, I got to know, I'm going to go give it to him, okay? Right? And just make sure that that's okay, so there's no problems. It's just playing the politics of a set. I've worked with feature directors that, come over to episodic, and ultimately they don't want you like Jack was saying, they don't want you anywhere near the actors, right? But then you might have actors that, on Sons of Anarchy, there were situations where the actors were like, no, I want to talk to the writer. you know, and because I have a question that doesn't really impact, you know, it's I need to see the bigger picture, and that's why, you know, that's sort of why we're there on set to be able to provide that and to be able to make sure like it's gonna fucking episode 2 is gonna match what we're trying to do in episode 8, but you know, even there's a relatively new position. You know, it's not brand new, it's been around, but of the director producer. And ultimately, that's, you know, not only are they helping you run your show and saving you a lot of money, they're also, you know, making sure that the directors that come in for an episode or two are you know, they're protecting the show in that sense. So the director producer will say, you know, what do you know, that doesn't feel, you know, so they'll be able to give notes on your behalf. Right?
Well,
You know, just on that level, he said we cross-board our show. And that means we take all 10, and instead of shooting episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, episode 4, it goes on till 10 if you want me to finish that thought. What we do is we then take, well, we have 8 scenes at Cornelia's family's house, and they're in episode 1, 3, 6, 9, and 10. So instead of saying, well, we'll go there for this episode, we take all those scenes from the 10 and we shoot them all, and we save a lot of money. It's out of sequence. It's very hard for the actors. We all have to keep it in our heads. So because we literally are shooting all 10 in pieces, we never know what each episode is going to look like until we're done. So we're really going on faith. Additionally, we don't get table reads. So we don't sit around with the actors. Table read is one of the greatest things. It's also awful because the network's there and they're always giving you notes off of people sitting around, and you're like, if on its feet, it's going to be better. But we don't do table reads. So the first time I'm hearing the actors do it is on set while Steven's blocking the scene. So Steven's thinking where he's going to shoot it. They're figuring it out. They're being mic'd up, and they're doing the rehearsal. So my writing partner and I are watching the rehearsal with our scripts, going, this is my first shot at rewriting it. I mean, I've rewritten it 1,000 times, but it's my first shot hearing it in the voice of my actor. So we've had to really learn. So we've already written it rewritten it a few days before, because once we cast the actors, we really wanted to get their voices, and we've been combing out words. And one of the things is often you write a draft, and it's a draft that's for reading purposes, but it's not a draft for shooting purposes. So that there's whole things where you go, hey, Steve, you better look over there, and that over there, where? In the corner. And then when the director comes, he just does a POV shot of the thing in the corner, and you go, well, let's cut those stupid lines. The thing that we ended up realizing was how much less we have to say once it gets in the actors' mouths. So we, being, of course, old sitcom writers who used to rewrite on the set all the time, just say, okay, let's cut this, let's cut this, let's cut this. So an actor will have memorized a page, and this is actually not fair to them. They've memorized an entire page of dialogue, or 2 pages of dialogue, and then you go, let's cut these 9 lines inside of it. And now they have to put the connective tissue together and then act it again. And, you know, it's not 100% fair of us. But one of the things we'll do is my writing partner and I will collaborate on that in the corner, you know, and they're always wondering what the hell we're doing. You know, it's a little weird, like we're little rats in the corner going, let's take your lines. And then we will never take it to the actor until we take it to Steven and some of the production guys, because we want everyone to know what we, you know, so we'll say, Steven, how do you act? And Steven will say, you know what, I like that line, and that's good, and I think he'll play it really neatly, and, you know, but yeah, you're right, let's just cut all that. That's just a waste of time. You know, faster, let's get to it. How little can we say and still get the gist of the scene? And you end up doing a lot of that. And so I found that we've turned our on-set moments into real opportunities to rewrite. And that's different. It's the tone of your show. I know a lot of other writers who do that. I know people who don't, who barely touch a word. For us, we like it to be fluid, because it's we're trying to make the show naturalistic. And if words are coming out that sound stilted or written or whatever, you're like, screw it, get rid of them. And you have to be so brutal, because I don't care if I like the phrase. I don't care if I like the line. I don't care if I like the scene. I mean, we'll go up to Steven on set and go, you know, I know we're heading off to the next scene, but we just realized we don't need it. And we'll talk for 5 minutes, and we'll say, yeah, let's screw it. And they'll say, okay, guys, we're going to this set now. We're not doing this. And why? Well, we're not doing that scene. Be brutal, because it's time, it's money, it's people's effort, and you're going, you know what, we can get through this day more quickly. and let's not burn our crew and our people out and all that. So you have to always and be ready to have someone go, that doesn't work, and you go, yeah, you're right. Don't be precious. You know, I've always found that people are precious about their stuff because they're insecure. And one of the things that was great about being a sitcom writer was people are rewriting you every 5 seconds. And you know in a heartbeat that sometimes something doesn't work because the audience didn't laugh, the audience didn't like it, and because you have an audience. And so really early on, you learn that you're not batting, you're never going to bat 1,000. So you have to be ready to just kill your darlings as often as possible, and be happy about it, and say, look, we save time, energy, money, and I save myself from putting a shitty line on on screen.
Well, let's see what this. I have a feeling that this audience is going to be particularly versed in the business and has questions to ask. So why don't we have the mics go around, and anybody who wants to ask questions can ask these two gentlemen questions. There we go. Hands up. There we go. Hands up. I see them. Go ahead. Sure. Go ahead.
Wait, I already know. Yes, I do have psychic powers. Oh, I thought that was your question. I'm sorry.
My question was, how conscious are you of the entire arc of the series, of the entire series when you start? So is it like, okay, we want to start here, and 5 or 7 seasons later, I know this is where it's going to end, and then you're backtracking from there? Or are you sort of more generating the idea from, okay, we're going to join the series here, and I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go, but it's going to go somewhere?
It really depends. I mean, it depends on how big your vision is for that season or the story, where you are in the puzzle. I would say that it would be a good idea to figure out a lot of that stuff in general terms, like what is your big narrative arc? Because ultimately, you don't want to get to mid-season and go, well, where's this going? Because you'll just write yourself in a box. In fact, you should have an idea where your show's going beyond just one season. But all that stuff, changes as you get down to episodes. You might find something on a script level. You might beat it out in a room, and you think you know what the story is, and then you get down to the writing part, and all of a sudden, oh my God, that happened. And it changes everything, and you have to re-break everything after it. But to go off course is I wouldn't recommend that.
Expensive.
Yeah, because ultimately, it just I would think that it would cause a lot more problems than solve them.
I have a question up on the left there.
I just had a question. So you said kill your darlings. Do you have any darlings that you don't want to kill, or passion projects that, say, that you got segued or you didn't get to actualize them? Like, do you have examples of that?
I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, look, passion projects for sure. I mean, I have a closet full of things that I, of course, wished had gone. But on the show, like a perfect example is you'll be in the editing process, and there was a scene in the second episode of my show. Someone gets electrocuted. Electricity's brand new. The hospital's just been electrified, and people don't understand it. I mean, they've never dealt with something that exists but you can't see. And so suddenly electricity, they don't know how it works. And so we had a scene that literally, like if 1900s version of Human Resources came in and said, well, we're gonna have to have a safety meeting. We literally had a guy from the Edison company come in, like a character, and he was gonna teach them how to use electricity. And when we started researching this, what we realized is that they were trying to show you what was safe and what was not. And so we showed a scene where he said, look, it's perfectly safe if you only touch one connector, but if you close the circuit, it's not there. And I'll show you by demonstrating on this cat. And he literally, and you were supposed to see this, and and Steven likes cats. So he cut away a little early, but but the whole audience was going just completely unaffected by this idea of how they were about to treat this cat. Because people had a different relationship to animals back then, and we thought that was really cool. But also, we loved the look on some of our characters' faces when they're about to electrocute a cat, and just how fucked up that was. And we even shot it. And in the cut, Steve was like, "You know what? We don't need it. It's a waste. Let's move on." We loved it, but it doesn't push our story forward.
This woman here has a question.
And that was a darling that we just had to say goodbye to.
I love the Bubble storyline on The Wire, and hearing you speak, you don't speak anything like Bubbles.
Right.
So my question to both of you is, how do you literally channel or capture voices of people who existed in a completely different economic time or social time, or have a completely different lingo from where you are actually from?
I can.
Well, I heard you have a black friend.
Yeah. I have two actually. I moved here from Tokyo when I was 8, and I moved to a town right outside of Baltimore, D.C. It was a commuter town, and I did grow up, with a lot of black friends, and so I knew the voice. Because ultimately you add a little bit of imagination to it, and it's just going out there and really listening to people talk, and learning the voice, because I didn't grow up with bikers, but ultimately I feel like if you don't know it, you got to do the research, and that's it. He didn't grow up in
I did not grow up in
turn of
1900.
the century, yeah. So it's part of the it should be a part of your toolbox.
I mean, I have an ear for accents. So, jokingly, last night in the cab leaving the dinner that you weren't invited to, I was jokingly talking about the Vancouver accent. And since I've been here, I've figured out all these little things. And so someone said, "You'll talk like a Vancouver," and you can hear it. And you say, "Oh, okay." So you pronounce it Mazda? No, it's a Mazda, man. Come on. It's things like, "I'm from Vancouver." Wait, are you asking me that, or is it because you're up talking? And so you start to pick up little things, and you go, oh, it's not just a boot, and that's a little on the nose, but you start to pick it up. I went to school in Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, you have an accent like this. But if you went to Minnesota, you go a little bit more like this, And I've always been able to pick up accents. So the Irish characters on my show, I love writing them because I can sort of do I can pretend I'm, James Joyce or something, and I'm doing these 1900 accents, and it's a lot of fun, and you start making up colloquialisms. We had an old Irish lady say, "Oh, quit your shit spitting," and it's like, "Oh, that's not real. I made that up." And there's another one for sex. There's a cop saying, "Oh, you're trying to get into this brothel? The whole city's going to hell, and you're trying to get your log dunked?" And there was like, "Wow, log dunk, what a great colloquialism." Well, I just made it up. But you start to get the vibe of it. You read an enormous, there's no real recordings from that era. So you start reading, and you start really reading the different writers and the different eras, and you just try to make it up. The good news is there's no recordings from that era, so nobody knows what it sounds like.
Question right here, this woman in the middle, I guess.
Well, I'm right up front. So.
Oh, sorry. We can't really see, so you'll have to raise your hands high.
Hello, my name's Andrea. Thanks very much for being here. My question is, when you're breaking a new season, how involved are the network at that time? Do you have to sort of bounce the ideas off of them from a macro standpoint, or do you basically just sort of deliver it as it goes along?
I'll just give a short answer to that. Yes, it depends on where you work. Generally, there's a period where you're getting together with your writers and kind of figuring out what the season's going to look like and what the arcs are and what the conflicts are, at least on the dramatic side. And you put together where the characters are going, where's the story going, what are we talking about this season, and you do a network, a pitch, and generally it's, all the executives are in the room, and you're sitting there, and generally, for instance, on Sons of Anarchy, that was Kurt's. I would accompany Kurt into that meeting, and oftentimes it was just me and him, and the studio and the network there, and this last season 6, he pitched out the bigger arcs. I pitched out the character arcs, and then the head of the network and Kurt would then engage in dialogue. They might have a point of view that in the case of FX and John Landgraf, what I witnessed was a very collaborative scenario where John's obviously a super smart guy, and you want to hear his ideas, because ultimately that's a guy like that is in that position for a reason. He's going to make your show better, and what I witnessed between Kurt and John was this really, they really respect and love each other, and wanted to do the best show possible, and so that was a learning experience for me, where I said, they're, all the horror stories that you hear, most of them are cliches, but, to find real success, you really need a really talented team, and you need a lot of support. And from the network to studio on down to your production team and the above the line, below the line, if everyone's, firing on all cylinders, at least you're gonna be proud of what you did and really stand behind it. It could be, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I've seen it all, because I've seen the micromanaging of the broadcast networks, where you pitch every story to them, you give them every outline, and they go pouring through it, and one by one by one, and I'll tell you just a very funny, quick little one is that these things sort of happen. Everything bleeds down from the top at these networks. I remember years ago, Warren Littlefield was head of NBC, and we were on an NBC show, and what he had done is, and they'd been in like a meeting one day with all of his underlings who were the executives on all the shows, and he said, "You know what? I always love bully stories. A story where there's a bully involved, blah, blah, blah." And every executive then on their next call with the shows that they were overseeing would say, Warren loves bully stories. And so, 6 weeks later, all these outlines come in from 10 different shows on NBC, and they all, at almost the exact same time, had been breaking bully stories. And you're like, wow, why is everyone doing it? It's just the zeitgeist. And what you find is often you're getting a messenger, and so you have to be careful whose notes you're following, because often it's somebody who's trying to guess what their boss wants. So you have to be careful on that. Luckily, we deal now with the people who are the decision makers. And for us, what we did was, once again, proof of concept. We wrote, when they greenlit us, we wrote a 73-page outline of every episode. And what we did was we literally said interior, surgical theater, day. We named all the characters that were in the scene, and then we literally wrote out what the scene was going to be. And next. So each episode ended up being about 7-8 pages in incredible detail. And so when we handed them the outline, they knew exactly what the season was going to be, minute to minute to minute, because we didn't want them. Remember, we were the guys who come in from romantic comedies and this and that, and now they were going to trust us with a large sum of money and a big show. So what we had to do was we had to prove that we knew what we were doing. And to their extraordinary credit, they've had incredible notes, but they've also stepped back and allowed us, and quite frankly, they trust our production team of Greg Jacobs and Michael Polaire, but they also, they trust Steven to know what he wants. And so, honestly, we're the lucky beneficiaries of that. But I always say proof of concept. Know where you want to go and show them, because a pitch, I'm not a circus clown. I'm a writer, and if I think I'm good at writing, then I'm going to show it to you on the page, not in a wonderful. I can't tell you how many people have pitched stuff, been great in the room, sold it, and then written a total piece of shit script.
I can tell you exactly how many.
But because I've rewritten them.
Yeah.
And so was he.
Well, the good thing for both of you is that they're both on cable shows and at good places and have had notes from really bright people. But I think Jack just gave, in a very brief amount of time, the downfall of broadcast networks in the United States. That was literally when a guy says, "I like bullying stories," and it becomes like a PSA. The more you know, right? That's the downfall of the networks happens when everybody just wants to please the boss and not please the story. But luckily, these two gentlemen have worked on a number of really great series, particularly in the cable arena. So let's give them a round of applause and wrap it up.